Our next speaker, by coincidence, is Brother Abdullah Al Andalusi. Abdullah Al Andalusi is an international speaker and activist for Islam. Many of us will have watched him on TV. He comes on many debates within the TV. His work involves explaining and demonstrating by rational argument the intellectual proofs for the Islamic belief system and promoting the Islamic way of life and Islamic solutions for contemporary problems. On a personal note, Abdullah is of Portuguese and French colonial North African descent. He was formerly a Christian until he embraced Islam at 14 after a period of study that started when he was 10 years old. Wow! Shakir embraced Islam at 15, and our next speaker, Abdullah Andalusi, started studying Islam at 11 and embraced Islam at 14. Allahu Akbar, where are we going wrong as Muslims? He has continued to study Islam in depth ever since. Abdullah has had a long experience of working in the Muslim community, and his activities involve research, writing, and talking extensively on Islamic revivalism, theology, philosophy and physical sciences, sociology, psychology, anthropology, and political philosophy. Too much for me to say, the paper goes on. Many of us will know him. If we don't know him, we will see him now, and inshallah he will inspire us for us to go on and then see other of his lectures which are available on YouTube. So without any further ado, inshallah, my dear brother Abdullah Al Andalusi.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. As-salatu was-salamu ala Nabiyyina Muhammad wa alihi tayyibin wa sahbihi salihin. I greet you all in silent grace and peace. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Now, the subject I was invited to speak about today was to do with science and the natural inclination of human beings to believe in God. And is there a natural inclination that science has noted for us to believe in God? Now, usually what we hear from people who claim to be supporters of science, many of them are atheists. There's a big majority of scientists who are not atheists, but the media seems to always give the attention to the scientists who are atheists to talk about things which have nothing to do with science, like Richard Dawkins and talking about morality when that's not his field. And sometimes they like to allege, that all human beings are born atheists, not believing in God, and that they later on they are inculcated with a belief in God. And so, according to their argument, we shouldn't believe in God because we're not born believing in God. But before I get to that fact, if we use their argument and take it to its logical extent, we're born with no morality then, nor are we born knowing language. So if we must abolish religion and abolish belief in God because we're not born with it, we must also abolish morality and language because we're not born with it, according to the atheists. So if they want to be consistent on the matter, they should, give up speaking language and just give up speaking and do us maybe a little bit of a favor, possibly. Now, what is part of the fitrah? What do we mean by even the word fitrah, the natural inclination of human beings? Now, science has done some experiments on children, not involving chemicals, but just observation of babies there was a recent study, and they did observation of babies, and they showed images to babies of I believe it was objects like falling down and hitting each other in a sequence. And what they noticed is that when these babies saw a video of these objects hitting each other and then suddenly jumping to, missing a whole segment in between and just jumping into where it shows like there was no cause behind the thing that they saw, the image, the baby would pay more attention to that. And they thought the baby seemed to be more shocked by seeing something that doesn't have a causality. The belief in causality, the cause behind things, is natural to all human beings, which is why babies and why kids, when they grow up, when they ask their parents the awkward question of where do babies come from, all these things are natural inclination of mankind to ask for the cause of everything. What created everything? What started everything that they observe? This is natural, as proven by scientific observation of babies themselves. If you show a baby something coming out of nothing, it's more shocked by that. It's not natural for us to believe in something that comes out of nothing, but to believe in a causality of things. So then, I'd argue that belief in God is innate in man because man possesses the ability, or rather the inclination, to find the answer to what has caused everything that they see around them in existence. And it's why that throughout history and throughout the many civilizations, virtually every single civilization of some kind and some form have believed in a higher power or a belief or a God or of some kind. Every civilization, religion seems to be so ubiquitous around the world from civilizations that never had any contact with each other. Why is that? It's because it's natural for mankind to want to find answers to the question which they face. So then, people say, how do we reconcile religion and science? Aren't they contradictory? And I say, you know what, this question is so recent in human history. The question of the compatibility between religion and science is really a very recent question, a very recent argument. What most historians will tell you is that for the vast majority of just Europe, and we'll go with European history for the sake of this argument because they like to view themselves as the center of the world, of world history, revolved around them. So, for the majority of European history, since their Renaissance, after they encountered a certain civilization which stimulated their thinking, from the 12th century up until the 18th century, the vast majority, even the 19th century actually, the vast majority of scientists were religious people, were Christians in Europe. And not only that, but in the West, the first universities built in the West by Christians, obviously Muslims built the first universities in the West, or the modern type of university, but the first universities built in the West by non-Muslims were the Catholic Church. The University of Paris, Cambridge and Oxford. We all have the church to thank for those institutions. The foremost scientific institutions and scientists were members of the Catholic Church. Many of them were clergy, members of the clergy. And they had sort of no problem with science and religion. So this question of, is there a conflict between science and religion, is very modern, and it comes because of a secular worldview which thinks that religion has no place in the world, and since science is viewed as a means to obtain knowledge of things, they say that religion has no place in science, or at least there is no place for religion in our understanding of the world. We don't need religion anymore. We have a secular worldview backed up by science. But there is a fundamental mistake in this. You see, I wonder if there's a clock around there. I'd like to give an example of a clock. If there was a clock around there, I would point to it and say, what can science tell you about the clock? All right? Science can tell you what a clock is made out of. It can tell you how many gears it has, whether it runs on batteries or is run by a wound-up spring. That's all that science can tell you about a clock. What religion or rationality can tell you is that the clock was made by something else, and what the meaning of the numbers on it are. Science can't tell you the meaning of language or number. That's why you can't use science on language, because language exists purely in the mind, and it's purely an expression of the intention behind the person who wrote the language. So if someone writes numbers on a clock, even when a child first tries to learn about what a clock means and how to tell the time, the child can already see the clock, and the child can already tell the clock seems to be moving and it has these strange function of this long hand and short hand and so on. But what the child doesn't know is what it means. And you can't, and even if the child broke the clock into pieces, and many of you might have kids who've actually done this, even if they broke the watch or the clock into many pieces and they looked at all of it, they wouldn't know what the clock was for. Likewise, if they broke your VCR or your DVD player or into pieces, they wouldn't be able to tell what it was for unless someone explains to them the purpose. And the purpose is provided by an instruction manual, which is provided by the people who invented it or made it, and it's for them to explain what was the intention behind that object. So science tells you what things exist, and religion and rationality tells you the meaning behind existence and what caused that existence. Now, one of the arguments they say is that you can't see God, so how do you know He exists? And likewise, they say, you never saw the beginning of the universe. How do you know the universe had a beginning? Or how do you know that the universe needed to be created by something else? And the very simple answer to this is, as any person would know, why is it that a child, if they saw a baby and they asked their parents where did babies come from, would it suffice to tell the child, babies, they're eternal, they've always existed. That particular baby you're looking at has always existed in the form it is. Would the child accept that answer? Would it make sense to the child for you to tell the child that answer? Or tell the child that the baby just popped into existence with no reason at all? It wouldn't make sense. The child said, why is it pop into existence? Where did they come from before that? They ask these questions naturally because it wouldn't make sense. As in, there's no causality there. Humans have a natural inclination to find the causality behind things. And so, the answer to that child, or what the child could respond back is, well look, if this baby was eternal, then why does it exist in the form it has existed? Why does it have 2 eyes and a nose and two ears? Why doesn't it have 3 ears or 4 ears or 10 heads? Why in that particular form? And ultimately, the only way you can answer that question is to say, well, at some point it was determined to have the form it had. Because either it determined itself to be that way, and then that would mean that it would create itself, which wouldn't make any sense because you have to exist to make yourself in the first place. So that couldn't be the case. Or it was made by something else, which gave it the forms and the features that you see it having. That's the only explanation. And that's what the child could respond back if it was a sharper child. Likewise, when it comes to the universe, or everything that you can observe anyway, you can deduce that everything that you can observe has certain form and shape and certain attributes, fixed attributes. So the very simple question is this: did it make itself, or did something else make it? It's a very, very simple question. As the Quran says, did they make themselves or make themselves the creators? The Quran makes the same rational argument to disbelievers who questioned the belief in God and questioned Islam. So ultimately, there's only two conclusions. Either the universe made itself, which is absurd because it would have to exist in order to make itself, and then it would need to make itself, and so that just is an absurd suggestion. Or the only other possibility is that whatever made everything that you can observe around you must have been something else. That's the only conclusion you can come to. And of course, the clever atheist will try to say, well, how do you know there's something else as God? You're just making that assumption. You didn't see what there's something else that made everything that exists is. You didn't see it. And I say, no, we didn't see what made the universe or what came before the universe. We didn't see it. But I tell you what, at some point, there has to be a start point to all this. Even if there were like 10 universes, even if our universe is just the 10th domino in a set of dominoes, there has to be the first domino, and the question is what pushed the first domino and began the sequence that ends up with our today. That is the only rational conclusion. And of course, then they will say, okay, well, if there was a first pusher of the first domino, a first creator, how do we know this creator wasn't created, is their argument. And we know this very simply. This creator wasn't created because, why does something need creation? Something only needs creation if it's finite and limited, as in it has only a limited shape, limited form. Remember I mentioned about the baby. If a baby has one head, two eyes, two ears, the question is, why that form? Who defined that form? It has to be defined by something, because it has two ears, not 5 ears or 10 ears. It has to be defined by something. And likewise, if anything, the universe, which is limited and finite, needs something to define and proportion it, give it all the things that you see it has. Who determined that? Who made the choice that it would have that? So when we say that the first cause, the first creator, the creator which created everything that would come afterwards, the reason why we know that however many universes there are, or however big this universe is, or however many universes came before this universe, the reason why we know that ultimately the first creator that made everything was not made by something else is because it is not finite and limited, it is infinite and unlimited. And something that is not finite, not limited, has no fixed form or fixed attribute that needs something else to define it or choose it for itself, to give it to it. And so we say that the attributes that God has is fundamentally He's infinite, all-powerful, unlimited, and He never had a start point because He never needed anything to define Him or give Him what He had. And likewise, the other question is, of course, the other point is that the universe, the Creator, all the attributes the Creator does have are those attributes which He chooses for Himself, and not ones which are chosen for Him. If these are chosen for Him, then He's not the ultimate Creator. Something made Him then. But if He chooses it for Himself, then He is the Creator. So we see in Hadith Qudsi where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that He made injustice forbidden for Himself. So He made injustice forbidden for Himself. It's very interesting because it shows that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave Himself the attribute of justice. That it is something that He determined, and nothing higher than Him determined this in His nature. He determines what His attributes are. And this is why we know and we believe that there is a God, and that this God requires nothing else to make it, because this God has no finite or limited things inside it that needs to be defined by something else. It wasn't made with things that it can't change, but rather it decides what it wants. What God, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decided what attributes He wanted to have and how He wanted to express His will. And when He made the universe, for example, nothing made Him made the universe. He did it out of His own will and His own choice. And that's a very interesting point if you think about it, because some people say, and some of the atheists, they try to use, going back to science again, they try to use, I'm going to say science in inverted commas. They try to say that, well, look, the universe was made by something called the multiverse, they say. And this is a universe, an infinite universe. They'll say, fine, the first creator is infinite, but how do you know He has intelligence? Or how do you know He has a will? How do you know this? Right? Maybe the first creator is a mindless, infinite thing, like a mindless robot of some kind, and they call it the multiverse, and it just makes infinite number of universes, infinite number of different types of universe, and our universe was created as one of the many infinite variations that there exist. And this is what they say that doesn't require. So they will concede. They'll concede that there must be an infinite beginner. Yes, but He has no intelligence. It's just doing it automatically, making universes automatically. And then, of course, when you say to them, well, why did He make this universe that has life on it? They say, this was only because this universe was one of infinite number of possibilities. And if you make an infinite number of possibilities, one of them is going to have one that can have life on it. That's their argument. Now, the reason why I say science in inverted commas is quite simply, there literally is no scientific evidence for that theory of them. It quite literally is just an imagined belief they thought would be an alternative to believing God, because they don't want to concede that God exists. So they found an alternative. They didn't discover it in a telescope or a microscope or any way. They didn't discover that there is a multiverses, or there's this infinite multiverse that makes the universe. They didn't discover it at all. It's literally from their mind. Now, I'll mention one absurdity of that in a second. But how do we know that's not true? Very simply, why go to the atheists and tell them, why does the multiverse make universes? Why does it do it? Why? There's only two possibilities. Either there is something greater than the multiverse that makes the multiverse make universes. Like, you know, a watch, you have to wind it up for it to work, right? So then the watch isn't the greatest thing. The greatest thing is the hand that winds it up and makes it tick. And of course, there's something greater than that, then the multiverse isn't the first cause, and there's something else which is the first cause. And you'd have to concede that it would have to be something that isn't automatic like a multiverse. The only other possibility is there's an internal mechanism inside the multiverse that makes the multiverse make universes. Of course, then the question is, what is this internal mechanism? Is it also automatic? And if it's automatic, then what is making that mechanism? And then what is making them smaller mechanisms? It's like opening up a watch. It's like, if someone asks you how does a watch work, it's like saying that a watch works because if you open it up, there's a smaller watch inside. And they say, what's inside that? Well, there's not a smaller watch inside that. Ad infinitum, which is just absurd. It would lead to infinite regress fallacy. It wouldn't work. Because you'd have to have a start point. You know. So then, the only answer to this question is that whatever this infinite first cause is, you tell the atheist, it had to initiate the creating of universes itself. Not because it was meant to, or because it has an internal nature that compels it to, but rather because it chooses to. And if something has choice, that is intelligence. That is will. And so we merely say that if something creates all of creation and is infinite, and it has will, then this is the fundamental definition of God. This is what in any language or culture, what God is. God is an infinite power that has choice, that has will, that can do things, and is not compelled to do things, but does it of its own volition, its own choice, its own intelligence. And so there is no escape rationally from concluding that God exists. And our fitra moves us naturally to ask all these questions until we reach the ultimate conclusion. And I'll finish up with this very fundamental absurdity, which I find quite hilarious. The atheist usually says, I don't believe in God, like I don't believe in fairies and unicorns. And when you ask them, what do you think made the universe? They say, maybe it's a multiverse. Okay. Then you tell them, no, you do believe in fairies and unicorns. You actually do. And they'll say, why? No, I don't. I told you I don't believe in it. Yes, you do. You see, if you believe in this multiverse, this mindless multiverse, that makes an infinite variety of universes, infinite variety, then there has to be at least one universe that has unicorns in it, and another universe that has fairies in it. So somewhere out there, you believe, according to your belief, there exists fairies and unicorns. Thankfully, we're not burdened with having such a belief. Jazakallah khair for listening. Assalamu alaikum.